Today's video is an example of two of the worst scenarios that could happen at sea combined into one terrifying incident. Getting shipwrecked in the middle of the ocean and seeing your friends getting attacked and eaten by sharks, knowing you're about to be next. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying shipwreck shark attack of Ray Boundy. Welcome to Final Affliction. The following is the deadliest shark attack in recorded history. The terrifying ordeal of this event is the true story behind the 2010 movie The Reef, which remains one of the most intense and hair-raising shark attack films ever created by Hollywood. It was 1983 and 27-year-old Ray Boundy was living his best life out in the scenic tropical city of Townsville, Australia. Captain of a long trawler boat, he was recognized as a capable and experienced sailor despite his young age. On July 22nd, he and his crew were making preparations for a shrimp fishing journey on the North Australian coast. He was accompanied by his second captain, 23-year-old Dennis Murphy, and his girlfriend, 21-year-old Linda Horton. They were aware of a particular region of water between Townsville and the Great Barrier Reef, famed for being a great fishing spot year-round. Ray intended on staying a few more weeks just to capitalize on this area that had calm water, slow winds, and plenty of fish. The first 2 days of this endeavor were a joy, filled with relaxation, laughter, and good catch. But it was on the third day that things took a turn for the worse. The area was hit by unexpected high winds. The crew had to make a choice: head back to town, which was still several miles away with the sea not as calm as before, or to weather out the storm and wait for it to pass, and the crew chose the latter. Many hours had gone by and the wind showed no signs of slowing down. It was midnight now and the dark was setting in, compounding their problems. The weather worsened and the waves started to crash against the boat with great force. It was now that the crew realized their trawler boat had serious internal flooding and tried as hard as they could to keep it afloat. Suddenly, Dennis noticed a giant wave hurtling towards them, and with little time for judgment, he jumped off the boat, which capsized after being hit. Ray and Linda, who were too late in noticing the wave, now found themselves trapped under the boat with a small pocket of air to breathe. The two quickly planned on getting out of this predicament by swimming far under the bottom of the capsized boat and then coming back up from the other side. After resurfacing, the two noticed Dennis not far away and quickly regrouped. The trio started assessing what options they now had, stuck in the middle of the water with a capsized and drowning boat, which was their only solid ground to stand on between miles of water in every direction. In their distress and confusion, a few hours passed. Ray calculated where they were based on their coordinates. He realized that they were at least 95 kilometers from Townsville and 45 kilometers from the closest coral islands. It was obvious that swimming all the way to either side was extremely difficult, but the group quickly realized they didn't have much of a choice. The sinking ship would soon disappear, and they only had a few minutes to salvage some things from it before it went down. They wasted no time gathering things from the shipwreck, tied them together with ropes, and got a surfboard to act as a support in turbulent water. It was a flimsy, makeshift solution, but it was all they had for the 45-kilometer journey to the islands, and without it, they would surely drown. With no access to drinking water, bearing the scorching heat of daytime, and the grueling physical exertion of constant swimming made them breathless, thirsty, and drained of energy. But they knew the only way was either forward or eventually down into the water. These were prime fishing waters, and this meant that humans weren't the only ones looking to catch them. Sharks were a regular visitor to this area, and encounters with curious sharks was a dangerously real possibility. An entire day of swimming had passed, and the crew were still at least 30 kilometers from land. Night was now setting in, and the dark quickly engulfed their sight yet again. Then there was some commotion in the water, and it wasn't any of the crew. The trio froze and tried not to make any sudden movements. They saw a fin in the water, not far from where they were. It was a shark. They didn't know what else to do but remain still, afloat, and quiet, in hopes that it swims away after a casual encounter. Dennis and Linda were visibly frightened. Their heartbeats were racing and they couldn't control the fear and adrenaline rush. Ray tried to comfort them by whispering how rare shark attacks were, and that the curious sharks usually leave humans alone if left unprovoked. At this point, their makeshift life raft had now broken up, and each of them was now in possession of a small piece that was keeping them afloat. Tiger sharks are the second largest after great whites. Their size and jaw strength make them one of the most formidable marine predators in the ocean. They can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, and both their lower and upper jaws have inward-facing teeth, allowing for them to grip and chew off anything or anyone unlucky enough to get in their grip. All of a sudden, Ray felt the touch of the enormous shark beneath him, but there was little Ray could do. It was soon after that the shark circled back and bit him on his knee. Ray kicked it with as much force as he could muster, which made the shark relent and swim off. But the shark had now tasted blood, and they knew it was coming back. Panic had now set in, and no one was quiet anymore. All three were now screaming and splashing in the water, desperate to get away from the shark. They were trying frantically to scare it off, but to no avail. Every time they heard a splash back in the distance, they'd turn their heads anticipating to see the shark swimming towards them. They'd occasionally dip their heads underneath the water to try to spot the shark, but the pitch-dark waters favored the shark and put the hopeless crew at a stark disadvantage. It broke the water once again, then just as swiftly disappeared back under. Suddenly, Dennis let out a loud scream in agony. "It's got my leg! The bastard's got my leg!" Ray shouted from afar, imploring Dennis to try kicking it again, but it didn't work as well as it did last time. But now the shark had come to feast, and was unwilling to relent or let go of Dennis. Ray and Linda looked on in horror, completely helpless as Dennis got pulled under and above the water several times before finally letting go. He was incapacitated and in extreme pain. The water surrounding him was a pool of blood, and it was obvious that he was losing it fast. As Ray and Linda swam up to him, it became clear that Dennis was missing an entire leg, and the profuse bleeding would soon render him unconscious. They tried to use a piece of cloth as a tourniquet in an attempt to stop the blood loss, but it wasn't long before the shark reappeared, not sparing them even a few minutes of peace. Dennis now realized that he could not be saved, and it was best to let himself become the shark's bait, to buy Linda and Ray enough time to escape. Dennis shouted at them to leave without him, and so they started swimming in the opposite direction. There was little time to process the emotion or the gravity of Dennis's sacrifice. All they knew in the moment was that they had to get to safety. They turn around and look at Dennis one last time, just in time to witness him being finally pulled under, never to be seen again. Linda, unable to hold back her emotions, lets out cries of helplessness. Ray offered her momentary comfort, but it was clear they had no option but to sustain a steady pace toward the island. 2 hours had passed and their speed warranted optimism of their survival, but it was short-lived. The shark appeared once again and began circling Ray and Linda in a cynical fashion. The shark took a plunge deep in the water as they were both frozen in fear. All of a sudden, it broke the water surface and this time went straight for Linda, biting into her arms and torso. With a firm grip on her body, the shark shook its head violently from side to side in an attempt to chew off a bite of her, before finally diving back into the water once more. All that was heard from Linda was a light squeal. Her death was swift but painful and in a state of terror. Everything fell dead silent for a moment. Ray was terrified into cold inaction, still trying to fathom the gravity of losing his girlfriend. He then turned around and swam as fast as he could towards the stone reef. His fight-or-flight response kicked in and he finally got close to it after a day of swimming. Ray was only a few hundred meters away from the shore when the shark resurfaced once again, but Ray noticed an approaching big wave and was able to catch it, using its speed and height to create distance from the shark. Exhausted and severely traumatized, he finally let his emotions go and started to process what had just happened. 27-year-old Ray was discovered the next day at 10 a.m. by an Australian Air Force rescue chopper that had been searching for the crew since they went missing after the storm. Ray went on to become captain and sailor to more boats and lived his life as a fisherman. He was never able to fully recover from this intense psychological trauma from this nightmare incident, and for long suffered anxiety and PTSD after those grueling 36 hours in the summer of 1983, the day he lost his girlfriend and best friend and narrowly escaped his own final affliction.